Welcome to this overview of test coverage. It will make you a better tester, and I'll help you to demonstrate how your tests ensure full coverage of the code base, requirements, functionalities, and risks, ensuring comprehensive testing in your IT projects. Here's a step-by-step guide to help you prove test coverage. Determine the type of coverage you want to prove. There are 4 measurements. First, code coverage measures the percentage of code tested. The second measurement is requirement coverage. This maps your tests to specific requirements to ensure they are all tested. The third item is functional coverage. This ensures all features and functionalities of the application are tested. And finally, risk coverage shows how well you've tested high-risk areas. Let's start by looking at code coverage. To prove code coverage, you can use tools to measure how much of your code is executed during testing. Popular tools would be used dependent on the type of code you are testing. If the code type is Java, you could use Jacoco or Cobertura. For JavaScript, use Istanbul. For Python, use PyTestCoV. For Java Groovy, use Clover. And for .NET use, NCover or OpenCover. These tools can generate several reports showing different criteria. Typical reporting criteria could include line coverage, what percentage of lines of code were executed. You can then decide if you need to plug the gaps. Next is branch coverage. What percentage of possible branches, such as if-else conditions, were executed? This will highlight if some branches are overlooked. And finally, path coverage, whether all possible paths through the code were covered. Sometimes it's just not possible to cover all the paths, but this will highlight any glaring omissions. For requirement coverage, create a requirement traceability matrix, RTM. This links test cases to requirements, showing stakeholders how each functional requirement has been tested, ensuring nothing is overlooked. Let's see an example. There are 4 column headers: requirement ID, description, test case ID, and test status. When we start writing tests, they can be linked to a user requirement. In this example, test case 2 shows that requirement 2 is covered. If a requirement doesn't exist for a test case, it could be a technical test not covered in user requirements. If not, you have to ask why a feature has been introduced and is being tested if there is no requirement for it. After the test is completed, the test status field is updated and business users will know if the requirement is fully tested and passed. Not all requirements will be covered by only one test. It is not unusual to have multiple test cases covering one requirement, as there could, in this example, be multiple ways of creating a customer on the front-end application. Test case 3 passed, and this could be a customer that's created using the title of Mr. However, in test case 4, when you tried to create a customer with the title of Doctor, it failed to save the information. The customer requirement will not be fully passed until a fix is provided, and test case 4 has a status of passed. Now we'll look at the third part of test coverage, which ensures functional coverage by mapping test cases for each feature or function. Just to offer an alternative way of showing coverage, we'll use a different matrix, although this could be used to show any mapping. Let's look at an example. The first column header lists the features and functions that need to be tested. Then there is a list of test cases. If a test case covers a particular feature or function, we can annotate that on the matrix. This will tell you visually if a feature or function has not been tested. In this example, the block customer feature is not covered, so let's add a test. Test case 6 will now test the block customer function, showing that all functions and features are being tested. That's not the full picture. Let's sum them up to see how thoroughly a feature or function is tested. You can then decide if more tests are required. The last thing to discuss in terms of test coverage is risk-based testing. You would typically design tests around high-risk areas, such as security vulnerabilities. You can then prove that the risks have been mitigated by linking them to the respective tests. Let's see how this works. There are 4 column headers: risk ID, risk description, test case ID, and test status. When a test case is written to mitigate a risk, it can be associated with a risk ID. In this case, test case 009 mitigates the risk for risk ID 002. After the test is completed and passed, the test status field is updated and the risk can be closed on the project risk list. As with other coverage matrices, not all risk will be covered by only one test. It is not unusual to have multiple test cases covering one risk, as there could, in this example, be multiple ways of measuring system response times. Test case 18 passed, but test case 19 failed, as it used a different measure. When a fix is provided and test case 19 is passed, then the risk is fully mitigated. As you can see, mapping test cases to requirements, functions, and risks can be quite a big overhead. That's why we prefer to use test tools that can do the job quicker than a spreadsheet and without the same maintenance overheads. These are a few of the commonly used tools to help you to report coverage. They will also help in reporting test progress to your test manager. The first tool is Jira with Zephyr or X-Ray. Then there's TestRail. And finally, my favorite, HPALM, an abbreviation for Application Lifecycle Management. Don't let me sway your judgment, though. My preference is because I have used it more than the other tools, so it's something I'm comfortable with. Some colleagues prefer the other tools, and it always constructively divides opinion. Test tools can visualize test coverage with charts or graphs, and can show code coverage over time, making it easier to communicate results. TestRail does not offer defect management directly, the other tools do, but it can integrate with a tool called Bugzilla to give you that feature. Most importantly, any of them are better than struggling with manual methods. Thank you for joining me in this lesson. You now have a good understanding of how to prove coverage of your testing. All you need to do is follow the 4 methods you just learned to provide strong evidence of your test coverage, whether covering code, requirements, functionality, or risk areas. These practices ensure comprehensive testing in your IT projects. Implementing these strategies will help you demonstrate that you have the testing fully covered. So keep testing and improving. For more testing insights, use the link below this video. There's lots of useful lessons there, and please subscribe to the channel. It helps us to create more free content. If you like this video, please hit the like button for me before you go. Take care.